I want you all to ask yourself something. If you could prioritize one thing in life, what would it be? Love, career, money, family, friends, or something completely different? Okay, now that we've got that established, how many of you are worried that you won't have enough time to achieve your goals? And how many of you have let that worry go from just that into an unhealthy obsession where you compared yourself against other people because you felt behind? Well, even if you haven't, let me tell you, I very much have. For as long as I can remember, my career has been my biggest concern. But I could never decide what I wanted to do, which is expected, because I'm just a kid, right? I was exploring, going through my options because it was fun. So when one of those options became law, I was told by someone older than me that when applying to university, we're expected to have a portfolio that has achievements date back years from our actual application year. But before I started stressing out about that, I was excited. I'd be able to plan my life from that point on and still be on track, right? No, I was very quickly proven wrong. Because at my first ever public speaking event I attended at 14 years old, I looked at the crowd of people younger than me around me, but were better than me, which in my head meant that they were a step closer to my own goal than I myself was. However, I didn't let that sway me much. I used it as motivation to get ahead. Again, did not last long. Because at my first ever TEDx, I looked up at the kid on stage with pure admiration. But in my head, I was telling myself how behind I was and how I seriously needed to cram everything in the world into an organized schedule so that I could get ahead. And I did just that. Because after I left that event, I joined, created, learned, taught, and studied as though nothing else in life mattered, other than being better than other people. I even made a calendar that mapped out when I should do it, what I need to do, and where I should do it. Where I spent my weekdays juggling work, research, and school, and weekends were solely reserved for some type of academic event. I had everything on that calendar. Everything but a social life. So, but I didn't really care because to me, that was a privilege. I didn't have time to have fun. I needed to lock in. So, even though I had to book family dinners as though they were doctor's appointments, I thought my life was going perfect. I'd have a stellar portfolio by the end of all of this. And, well, I was living the workaholic dream. Again, very quickly proven wrong. Because the worst thing that could have ever happened to me happened. I burnt out. I lost the ability to sit down and work or do any of the things I used to enjoy doing because over time I started seeing them as a chore and a burden instead of something that it should be, something we should enjoy. I was desperate to get back to normal until I realized that from graduation milestones to career promotions, marriage ages to retirement benchmarks, modern life is mapped out against invisible deadlines. So I started thinking to myself, what if time, as we use it, is less a law of nature and more a social metric system designed, standardized, and reinforced by an outdated one-size-fits-all life template that tries to tell us where we should be by now? Eventually, I gave up trying to force myself to sit down and work, and I forced myself to think instead. How did I even get here? Why would I go through all of that if it would land me to this point in my life, and was it even worth it? Before I actually answer those questions, let me explain something. As a population, we live our lives in routines. Wake up at 6:30, finish getting ready by 7:15, and etc. We use clocks to measure checkpoints and to see where we are in our day, right? Well, essentially, I was following something called the social clock, which is a concept introduced to explain the unspoken pressure that societal norms create to pass certain benchmarks in life within a set period of time. And because of those pressures, our brains can begin to be hardwired to worry about questions like, am I doing the right thing? Am I as good as everyone else? And how do I measure up to them? But because being a part of society comes with its own intricacies, and not following society's social clock to the T is nearly impossible. Why? Let me talk about chances. The chances that you experience one or more deviations from the social clock at any point in your life, whether planned, spontaneous, or completely out of the blue, is nearly inevitable. People fall sick, you become a sudden caretaker, or someone makes a random decision to move across the world for their work or education. Anything can happen. The chances that you go online and in mere seconds you stumble across the profile of someone who seems to be living your dream life is again nearly inevitable. So, you may be wondering, if the chances of facing this pressure made by society is so high, how do we actually fight back against it with our own force? Well, someone told me something that completely changed my life. They told me that if I wanted to achieve unconventional success, I must be willing to take the unconventional path. And it made me realize that I need to stop taking blips of people's greatest achievements to make checkpoints in my own future and instead build my own story. Because I have my own individuality, and every single person who I took a blip from built up to their achievement. They all had a story. Now, I want you all to close your eyes and ask yourself this one thing. Is time a natural element that was merely discovered and named by mankind one day? Or is it something we invented completely out of the blue to help us measure something in order to make our lives easier? Or is it even both? It's deep, I know. But the most important step to be able to take your own path is to be able to see through your own lens. Now, open your eyes and look through this lens. The most important thing you must remember that social comparison and the social clock have in common is that they're both an illusion illustrated in accordance to an outdated average. As technology advances in our world, human pathways and communication have shifted rapidly since this invisible social standard was set. People learn differently, act differently, socialize differently, and gain experience differently. So, stop using time as a decision-making prospect and instead use your instinct, because using time can often cloud your judgment and create space for more difficulties in your life. Let me tell you a story about when I did that in my life. In the 6th grade, everyone around me had a phone, whereas I had a fat calling watch stuck on my wrist with none other than 3 contacts on it and nothing else I could do with it. I went home and I begged my parents to buy me a phone. Why? Not because it was a good communication tool, but because I was the only 6th grader that didn't have one. I bought that phone. Now, a week later, a newer, better phone came out, which was around the same price, and honestly, would have better suited for me, because I love photography and that had a way better camera. So when that phone came out, I realized that I picked the phone I had at the time because of the decisions that were made by people around me. So did that really make that decision my own, or did it just make it influenced? So let me ask you guys this one final question. How many of you have canceled or missed out on plans with friends or family because you wanted to work on something else? Well, I did that more than once. I did that more than twice. In fact, I did it so many times, I can't physically count the amount. I sacrificed so much of my social life due to my long-term emotional turmoil that it eventually vanished. Now, why am I brooding about how I had no friends at a point in my life? Well, because having a social life and regular face-to-face interaction is just a part of being human. People shape perspectives, experiences, and environments. Being around your friends can light up your day, but it can also remind you that taking a detour to do something that you want from time to time won't kill you, and it certainly won't destroy your future in any way, shape, or form. So, when the work feels like too much, do yourself a favor, take a walk, do something creative, call a friend, hang out with your pet, or my personal favorite, take a nap. So, if you think I'm lying, or I'm just telling you all this to make you feel better, let me tell you a story about the person who actually drove me to talk about this, who reminded me that my milestones do not define me, no matter what. My dad. He grew up being class topper in high school. And his grades were untouchable. So when his big exam came up, he thought he'd ace it as usual. No, he got a 53%, which at the time was considered a fail. And when he passed college without a degree, he still didn't let that stop him. So, with less than $500 in his bank account and the dream, he took a flight to China, a country he is completely unfamiliar with, and built a business. And now, more than 22 years later, he's the founder of one of the most successful interior contracting companies in the world, and more than that, he's the most hardworking and supportive person I know. Because of him, me and my sister were brought up in a better world and better chances. Now, does my dad's story mean that I was just gonna let my burnout consume me, maybe become a Nepo baby, or go where the wind takes me at this point? No. It just made me realize that my future won't collapse if I put myself first. So when society promotes a standardized life script, graduate by this age, build a career by that, have a family by another, we begin measuring our worth against a generic blueprint rather than our own individual journey. The result? A generation that feels perpetually late to their own life. But the truth is both liberating and radical. Because progress is not linear and timelines are not destiny. Human growth unfolds in seasons, not spreadsheets. So by reframing time as a flexible construct rather than a fixed verdict, you can redefine your success on your own terms and recognize that being behind does not exist according to an outdated system we created. Thank you.